Part of that was the economic impact payments, basically what the senator from Vermont is proposing here in this bill he wants to pass by unanimous consent. It spent $274 billion. It was paid to just under 166 Americans for an average check of about $1,673 per person. If you break that down into households, because according to the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, the average check per household is $2,400. That's 115 million households that got a check. 115 million. Now remember, at the low point, 25 million Americans had lost their job. We sent checks to 115 million households. 4.5 times the number of people that lost their jobs. My problem with the CARES Act, with the first four packages, is it was a shotgun approach. We just spent money. We just opened up the spigot and we just sent it all over the place. We didn't have time to target it to those that really need it. As a result, and we're seeing today, businesses that needed it, business owners, small business owners, have been wiped out of their life savings. They didn't get relief. It wasn't well designed. It wasn't well targeted. And we probably spent hundreds of billions of dollars and sent it to people that didn't need it. Madam President, we're $27.4 trillion in debt today. That's 128% of the size of last year's economy. If this bipartisan deal goes through, about $1 trillion, we'll be in $28.4 trillion in debt, 132% of GDP. I remember the good old days when I first got here. I ran because we were mortgaging our kids' future. We were a little over $14 trillion in debt, and our economy is over $15 trillion. We were under 100% debt to GDP ratio. What the senator from Vermont is proposing is basically duplicating, without any reforms that I know of, those economic impact payments from the CARES Act, another $275 billion for a total of $550 billion, $500 billion, sent out again to 115 million households, when right now we've this is tragedy, every job lost is a tragedy, but we have 9 million jobs less than we had when we had a record level of employment before the recession. 9 million jobs lost. 115 million households. That's 12.6 times the number of jobs that have been lost. I'm not heartless. I want to help people. I voted to help people. I voted for the $2.2 trillion CARES Act, but I also am concerned about our children's future and the fact that we are mortgaging it. We do not have an unlimited checking account. We have to be concerned about these things. So my complaint about the senator from Vermont's bill, and quite honestly, the bipartisan effort, we have $600 billion unspent, unobligated. Let's work long and hard. Let's look at economic data. Let's target it properly. Let's not just shotgun it out to the economy again, wasting tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars. Let's focus on that. Let's pretend it's like real money, like it's our money, and spend it well. We don't need to mortgage our children's future by another $300 or $400 billion. We don't need to do that. We can alleviate suffering. We can help our fellow Americans. We could have done it in September, but the good senator from Vermont and all of his colleagues on the Democrat side simply won't take yes for an answer, and my guess is they're taking that same stance today. So, Madam President, I object.
The thing about Ron Johnson claiming he's not heartless and that he wants to help people is that it rings especially false when he's blocking a bill that's only intended to help people. So here's the deal. There was a bipartisan bill between Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Josh Hawley to deliver direct relief in the form of stimulus checks to the American people. I should remind you, we're in the middle of a pandemic. 315,000 Americans have died. Millions have lost their jobs. Hospitals are filling up. And yet Ron Johnson objected to the unanimous passage of the bill because suddenly, now, he's worried about the deficit. The Republican Party has become a parody of itself. I should note too that Ron Johnson, this past week, only days ago, voted for a $740 billion defense bill. If we divided that between the roughly 150 million Americans who are eligible for a stimulus check, that would be almost $5,000 per person, 4 times what we'd receive under this bill. And you know what? It's the strangest thing. I couldn't seem to find the video of Ron Johnson standing up while that bill was being voted on and complaining about mortgaging our kids' futures. Weird how sending buckets of cash to defense contractors is fine, but helping Americans struggling to put food on the table and pay rent and keep the heat on? Well, we have to be fiscally responsible here. What about the fact that Ron Johnson also voted for Trump's $1.5 trillion tax bill, a bill that dried up revenue, exploded our deficit, and put the US on the path to fiscal ruin? But because Ron Johnson himself would benefit, well, suddenly it was okay. I guess he just figured that those children that he's so concerned about now would just, figure it out. Also, just think for a second about Johnson's claim that he's trying to protect the future for our children. Those kids need to eat today. Those kids need to live in a house and not get evicted today. They need to have the utilities on today. So Johnson can pretend that he's doing young people a favor by voting against relief, but that relief is exactly what millions of kids need to get to tomorrow. In reality, this whole spectacle isn't about helping children, it's about helping himself, because when the money wouldn't benefit him personally, well then clearly he just doesn't care. Another point Ron Johnson brought up is that only 25 million Americans lost their jobs, so we're basically wasting money by giving 150 million Americans checks. As if just because you haven't lost your job, you haven't been financially impacted by this pandemic. As if people's salaries haven't been cut. As if a 2-income household didn't suddenly become a 1-income household. As if businesses didn't slow down in the entire economy. As if gig workers are still getting exactly as many ride shares. As if parents didn't suddenly have to pay for childcare during work hours since schools are closed. As if the only ones impacted were the people whose jobs were lost and no one else. I don't know who needs to hear this, aside from Ron Johnson apparently, but everyone is feeling the impacts of the virus, even those who were lucky enough to not lose their jobs. Business is not back to normal, and the effects of that are being felt everywhere. But of course, Johnson wouldn't understand because he's a multi-millionaire. He is the 9th richest person in the Senate. And so do you really expect him to understand how a family living paycheck to paycheck might still absolutely need a stimulus check, even if they've not specifically lost their jobs? Of course not, because for the umpteenth time, he's not looking out for regular people, he's looking out for himself. So now that a Democrat is poised to take the White House, Ron Johnson and plenty of his GOP colleagues will inevitably pivot back to fiscal conservatism, but it goes to show that the only thing they actually care about is partisan theatrics, which won't serve Johnson well considering he's up for re-election in 2022 in Wisconsin, which just elected a Democratic governor, a Democratic senator, and a Democrat for president. And I'm not so sure that his constituents are going to be thrilled with the fact that he unilaterally blocked them from getting the relief that they so desperately need. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.